Close to the desk,
Yeah,
close to the camera. Am I in shot now? Can you see me?
yeah, definitely. I think so. Well, thank you for giving me your time and your lunch break at the same time for this podcast. It's my third episode so far. I did one in Istanbul and one in London, and then this one is going to be in Dublin, which is amazing.
Great. I'm the Dublin leg of the European tour so far.
Yeah,
Podcast,
yeah, it's
brilliant.
the first one in Dublin, so I'm pretty excited about this one. And you've got like a phenomenal career behind you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about these kind of things, as in career and then personal
Sure.
development and stuff like that.
Sure.
Because I would say like I'm just 23 years old. I'm really young. Just graduated out of university. So what I really want from my life and my career is just develop myself, meet a bunch of smart, intelligent, talented people, and absorb like their knowledge that they've gained during those 20
Yeah.
years. So the reason of this podcast is because of that, to meet
Cool.
and spend a little bit of time with people who you wouldn't be normally able to meet. So that's my story, and I would like to ask you. So you've started from consulting from various companies, including McKinsey,
Yeah,
to now like the global head of customer success.
that's right.
How was that whole journey for you? Like,
Yeah.
how did it start? Would you say that, like, if you think back 20 years earlier, would you think you would be here the way you are right now?
Absolutely not. I definitely didn't imagine I'd be here 20 years ago. Not even 10 years ago. I imagined I would be here. So, I mean, just to give you context, and by the way, you forgot one key ingredient in all of that, what you said, right? Which is you're young and you want to learn from people and whatever else. Have some fun is very important, right? Very important, right? It's about the journey, not the destination, right? And you have to have some fun and enjoy yourself along the way is kind of one of the key takeaways I'd have. So I originally went to university in Ireland, in Dublin. In fact, I was a civil engineer, so graduated as a civil engineer right out of college. So nothing to do with the tech world. In fact, very far away from the tech world. And then was passionate about the environment. So spent another couple of years in college doing research on recycling polymers, so recycling plastics to put them in roads,
Cool.
right? Some publications there. Probably could have pursued a PhD, but I realized then quickly you start learning about yourself as you
Donnchadh,
grow up.
can I get you a bit closer to the microphone? Yeah, you
Yeah.
can, yeah. Push
Sure,
it
no
towards you.
problem. It's my first
Yeah, okay.
podcast in podcast form. We good here now?
Yeah, that's good.
You got me. Okay, cool. So, started to start to learn more about what I liked and what I didn't like, and what I definitely didn't like is not working with people. And when I was in engineering and in doing research, I was working in a lab on my own, no interaction, limited interaction with other people, super interesting work, a lot of data and everything else, but probably not something that energized me day to day. So went into consulting, engineering consulting, that is this time, right? Working in development, for large kind of real estate developers and developers. Then moved after that into strategy, a strategic side of kind of engineering consultancy around transport and transport planning. So really modeling, building the models and the logic that drove investment decisions for infrastructure for governments and state bodies, right? So, combination of engineering, modeling, economics, psychology in some places, right? And I really liked that work because, it was kind of cutting edge and it was new, and we're pushing the boundaries a little bit about, what we could produce and the decisions we could allow our stakeholders to make. But again, you learn more and more about yourself. What I didn't like about it was quite slow moving. It takes a long time to build these models. It takes a long time to use the data and the insights coming out of the models to make decisions. And also it was very political, right? So decisions about where you involve governments or politicians obviously naturally become political. So I loved working with people, right? I love solving great, big problems. I love innovating. I didn't like waiting around, right? And also in civil engineering, your career progression is kind of pegged to the ecosystem that you're in, and that's kind of in around government and construction and all these things that are very slow, right? In terms of how they how you build experience and then how you progress, right? And so in and around, I don't know, must have been, I'm trying to say maybe 12 years ago, I decided to maybe, you know, pivot into something else. I didn't know what else I was going to pivot into. I didn't know. I just knew that the world I was in wasn't quite for me. I had a ton I enjoyed about it, but not everything. So I went to business school and did an MBA to kind of learn more about, you know, what I didn't know. You know, I knew I didn't know a lot, but I wanted to learn a little bit more about kind of what was out there, what was available. Did
it teach you what you were looking for?
It gave you, like, I would say that the content of curriculum itself was fine. It was good, right? Went to Smurfit in Dublin, and it's a fantastic business school out there. And I learned a ton from my lecturers, but I actually learned as much from my class and my peers in the class, all very experienced, all with like at least 10 years work experience, that kind of thing, from lots of different parts of the world. Some were entrepreneurs, some were accountants, some were, you know, bankers, you know, lots of different other engineers like me, lots of different backgrounds. And the discourse day to day with those people, I did it full time for a year, really just opened my eyes to a lot of the other worlds out there, the learnings that they had in, you know, working in those worlds. And then, you know, off the back of that, decided, right, I want to work in consulting, because it allows you an opportunity to go and learn a certain way of thinking, but do it in an industry agnostic way. So spend a bit of time in lots of different industries, right? And so joined McKinsey after business school, and made it part of my journey at McKinsey, made it part of my mission to go and try and sample what it was like to work in as many industries as I possibly could. So any opportunity to work in a net new area I hadn't experienced before, I took it, right? As long as the engagement, you know, usually they're 10, 12, 14 weeks, as long as it was also something that was is pretty interesting to me. And McKinsey facilitated that amongst their staff. You know, you could actually kind of pick and choose a lot more about what you worked on and what you didn't work on. So I went and I worked in financial services and banking, worked in utilities, I worked in online gaming, I worked in a lot of different industries, and each one of those studies gave me some insight into some of the problems some of the senior executive leaders were dealing with in those industries, and also helped me understand a lot more about the industry in depth. So a huge learning curve over a very short space of time. Got to solve problems at pace, right, with very smart individuals, build great relationships with my colleagues, and work with people, which is something I already said is important to me. And work on problems that really matter to companies at the time, right? So super enjoyable period of my life. Never learned more in a short space. And then I got a call one day to tell me about the fantastic things happening at a company called Qualtrics that I'd never heard of before. We were just kind of landing in Europe. And the more I heard about the trajectory of the company, the headroom available, the category we're creating, the opportunity in Europe in particular, the more I got excited and interested, and it also offered me the opportunity to go and not only develop strategies for companies and solve big problems for companies, but also work with people long term, help people develop over the course of their career. Consulting, you don't get to do that. You help them over a short space of time, but not in the longer term, and go and build something. And one thing I've realized now is that I'm a builder at heart, originally a civil engineer, but you know, I love taking a step back after a period of time working on a project and kind of looking at what I've built with the teams that I've worked on, with the colleagues that I've worked with, And that's something that gives me great satisfaction, understanding, you know, that's something, whatever you built wasn't there, you know, 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever it is, right? So that's something that I probably took me a long time to realize was one of the things that drive a lot of satisfaction for me in work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I'm thinking about any career moves or any opportunities open for me, even within Qualtrics. To date, over the last 7.5 years, you know, I've asked myself that question: does this opportunity give me the ability to go and build something, to innovate, to create something new, and to work with people in an environment that kind of is a growth and build mindset? And most of the opportunities, luckily to date, have. And that kind of rule of thumb hasn't steered me wrong at all.
It seems like your search for something different turned out quite well. Would you say like your experiences from like civil engineering and all of those consulting firms, including McKinsey, shaped the way you are now? Like shaped the way you are managing, shaped the way you are thinking?
Yeah, I mean, we're all products of our own environment, right? The environment that we've grown up in as children, that we're educated in, that we've worked in through the years. Everybody is unique in that respect. The quality of some of the experience varies, obviously, depending on your background, where you come from, where you had the opportunity to work. But you know, that's something I often advise people when they're sitting around a table, maybe if they're a little bit more junior and they have a point of view, but you know, some of the more senior people are having a conversation and they're a little bit wary of sharing their point of view, is that, hey, you know, nobody else at that table has had the experience that you've had, and therefore, you know, you are more likely to bring a new perspective that's valuable to the group than many of the other people, irrespective of how senior they are, right? And that's definitely something that I continue to realize is more and more true as we go through my career. Some of the better ideas and some of the stronger points in very large, important meetings that I've been in have been made by some of the people who have just that different perspective, right? And that's irrespective of you know, how old they are or how much work experience they have or how senior they are. It's all dependent on their point of view. Mm-hmm. So yes, yeah, absolutely, it shaped me a ton, and I've been lucky enough to have you know, been able to take with me along the way, after the engineering experience with the problem solving and the level of rigor, the McKinsey experience with the, again, you know, problem solving, more top down Pareto approach to problem solving and storytelling, and with the experience across a lot of the different industries and you know, verticals, I kind of have developed a, you know, very broad toolkit that I can use to develop solutions for a lot of problems we face day to day at work in our, you know, in Qualtrics. You know, it's stood me well.
About these tools and customer success.
Yeah.
So what is customer success? What are the great things about it? And then what are some really big challenges you've faced, especially with like the pandemic going on, economic crisis, stuff like that? What has changed during the years?
What has changed? So, I mean, customer success as a function, as a profession, really has evolved a ton in the last 10, 15 years, and it continues to evolve. That's why it's a kind of a fun place to work, because we're still defining our best practice and what good looks like, right? And we continue to innovate at pace. I often get asked this by people: what's the difference between customer success and account management, or what's the difference between customer success and insert, you know, any other function here? I think the key difference for me, and as I said, this is still an evolving space, is if you're just account management, you're there just to make sure all the things that are hygiene that the customer might expect work, right? And so do they have the bills that they need to have? Can they pay their bill? Can they, you know, if you're in technology, do they have all of the kind of the users and the administrators set up in the right way? If there's a support issue, is being dealt with in the right way? Is the customer happy, right? I.e., with the product they've bought. These are all hygiene things. These are things that you would expect to work anyway. I think the customer success dimension, is built on top of the general account management. Becomes a little bit more strategic because you're making sure the customer actually not only does well on the hygiene dimensions, right, and is happy on the hygiene dimensions, but also continues to capture more and more value associated with the solution that they have procured from their vendor, in this case Qualtrics. And so the CSM can actually step in and become part of the solution and move the needle for the customer and for their business, and therefore kind of is a much higher value add resource than a basic account manager, right? And so that's why we're able to drive the business value to our customers, which drives the high renewal rates that we look to drive for our business, and also expansion of our customers' programs and expansion of their relationship with Qualtrics, which I think is far more satisfying, right? And that's back to the building piece for me, right? You're helping a customer build successful programs, successful businesses, and in turn, you're helping Qualtrics build a successful business too, which is something that I think is far more fulfilling than going in and just doing some of the hygiene things that a customer might expect in their account. And I think for me, we're continuing to define what good looks like there on the strategic stuff. So you're asking about how it's evolved and the innovation and whatever else. I think, building the playbooks and the standard ways of working to democratize the way in which we help our customers and to continue to build them best practice in XM, that is based off kind of what the best in class customers we work with do, but bringing that to all of our other customers, I think is something that is, still not as consistent as we want it to be. Mm-hmm. And that's where we've been innovating and pushing the boundaries over the last year or so, right? Because 2020 was an interesting year for all of us, I think, with the global pandemic, and I think customers then went back to basics in terms of what they look for from a vendor. I think what that allowed us to do actually was to change our relationship with customers as well, because in a world of business as usual, keep the lights on activity, there's maybe there's a tendency for customers to treat some of their solutions or some of their vendors as just quite transactional. 2020 kind of created a ton of uncertainty and allowed us to step into a bit of a vacuum that the customer had around kind of what do I do now, right? How do I make sure, for instance, how do I make sure that my employees are all now safe, right? As an employer, right? Okay, now that they're safe, how do I make sure that, all right, they're safe, but they're now productive because they got to work from home, right? Most of them have probably never worked from home, right? How do we do that, right? How do I make sure that when they start to come back into the office, they do so in a safe way and they're also productive in a new hybrid environment, right? These are all new questions for customers to ask, and they're questions that customer success in Qualtrics help them answer. And in helping customers answer those questions for the first time, you build a relationship and a rapport and a level of trust with that customer that you might never have had in a business as usual environment, right? So it was actually key for us in deepening our relationships with customers and helping customers understand the value we could bring to them and their business. And some of the deeper relationships that some CSMs have were forged during 2020 or early 2021 when there was a lot of uncertainty, right? And here we go again, facing more uncertainty, right? Yeah. We got a global macroeconomic conditions are, far from ideal. We know we probably have some element of a storm ahead, and our customers are figuring out how to react, how to better retain their customers, what's most important to their own customers, what's important to their employees, how do they make sure their employees are going to be more productive. And these are questions that our CSMs are geared up to help them answer, continue to build that relationship and become more strategic.
So, like, being the global head of anything, I assume is has its responsibilities and its challenges across these difficult times. So now I have two questions. One of them is, how do you manage your time? And the second thing is, what's the most scrappy thing you have done so far?
The most scrappy thing. Okay, well, how do I manage my time? It's tough at the moment, right? You have to be very structured, I think try and build as much routine as you can into your day or into your week. That is easier to do when you're not traveling, right? When you are traveling, the routine changes a little bit. I'll talk about that in a sec. But when you're not traveling, trying to make sure that you ring-fenced time for family. In my case, I've got 4 kids, and my wife as well, who I need to spend time with, right? Trying to ring fence time for yourself, particularly from a health and fitness perspective, to make sure you're getting exercise, you're staying healthy, you're making space for yourself mentally. Nobody's going to do that for you. People are going to be competing for your time everywhere, and if you just say yes to everything, then you won't have any time to do any of those things. So just ring fencing your time and building a schedule and an operating cadence that allow you to kind of take care of the things that matter most to you, right? Family, friends, and your own health, I think are key, and then everything else fits around that. And then when you're traveling, look to try and just build mini routines into traveling. So I try and, for instance, get up no matter where I am and get some exercise, go for a run if I can, explore the area that I'm staying in, and make sure that I'm getting home in time with the weekends to spend time with family, and that allows you to kind of operate in a somewhat normal place. It's always challenging leading a global function out of EMEA, given time zones. You wake up, you got emails in your inbox from Asia Pacific region, you got phone calls Asia Pacific, you got phone calls with EMEA.
I didn't even think about that.
And then as the afternoon progresses, you have your US colleagues coming online and getting geared up for the day too, right? And having conversations with them, and you got to balance the workload, so that you're make sure you unblock the things that you need to unblock, i.e. the work that needs to be done or the decisions that need to be made with you in the room, right? And it's a delicate balance, being on all those meetings and not being, maybe deprioritizing some of the other meetings if you can, right? So I think that's the key, to try and create some sort of balance, right? I think it doesn't always work. It does stretch you a little bit, especially particularly traveling and being jet lagged constantly. I think for the last maybe 6 weeks, for the last 7 weeks, and I'll be traveling again next week. I was traveling. Some of those time zones are, plus 7-8 hours from where I live, so it takes a little bit of a toll, but you do your best. On the scrappy thing, being a global, is that, when you talk about scrappy, what do you mean there? Do you mean like
the Qualtrics culture?
The Qualtrics culture.
What have you shown in terms of scrappiness? Because
a ton.
Normally, at least in my head, it's always like, okay, if someone is like a manager or like a global head of something, like it's someone who's probably working too many hours, being a bit boring, but you are like quite the opposite. You have your own schedule, but then you're also a funny guy. Like during the TJets, you make jokes, and it just changes the perspective of a manager, let's say. So that's what I mean in terms of like the scrappiness. Like you're showing small things every day, but what's the thing that comes to mind during all those years when you said like, okay, this was a hell of a scrappy move?
Yeah, I have a lot of hella scrappy moves, and I think but back to the other thing about making jokes. I mean, like, irrespective of what level of kind of seniority or responsibility people have, they all have different personalities, right? I think you just don't get to see them as much, and maybe we work in a world today where it people might perceive it as a little bit risky to show that you are anything other than some sort of a corporate leader, right? Which of course is no fun for anybody. So I try and insert some level of personality and fun into some of those meetings, right? Because we have a lot of meetings, and so the TGITs and some of the all hands we have here in Dublin and a few other things, you just try and have a bit of fun with them, just to kind of drive engagement and keep people interested, and then show, of course, that we're all human. On the you give me license to crack some jokes on in this forum now. Is that what's happening here?
Definitely.
I haven't
let's,
come with
let's
any.
bring the jokes.
I haven't come with any jokes. Yeah, I'm not a stand-up comic. But at the scrappiness, I would say, I like a lot of the scrappier moments. Actually, the bigger needle-moving scrappier moments were right at the start. 2016, 2017, 2018. It goes on and goes on, but like, when we were moving up market into the enterprise space, we did a lot of incredibly scrappy things to make things work for customers, as to win customers and win contracts that we probably wouldn't have had we had no right to win, right? And that's not because we weren't good enough, right? We were. It's not because we didn't have the right people. We did have the right people. It's not because our product wasn't good enough. It absolutely was. It's because we maybe didn't have the track record that many of our enterprise customers were looking for them to say, okay, I trust that I'm writing a bigger check for you guys, and I want reassurance that that's not going to reflect poorly on me, because you're not going to deliver the goods, right? And so convincing them that we could deliver was kind of part of the key part of the unlock to go winning that business. And of course then moving into the enterprise space, because success breeds success and unlocks more conversations and more growth opportunities and everything else. But to start that flywheel off takes a lot of work. So, and that really, didn't start top down, right? I think, what the founders of the company did, and the executive leadership at the time, was create an environment where people felt they were empowered to go and just kind of call their own shot on a few different things. And a few bigger deals we had in Europe right at the start, I won't mention the customers, we had no right to win, but we did, because we had a small group of individuals that had a kind of a builder's mindset, and a mindset that they would find a way to win, even if they didn't have the resources or the references or the track record, right? We're confident in their ability. We're empowered by the company, and went and built playbooks and work plans and documents and assets that demonstrated to the customer that we could absolutely deliver what they needed and more, right? And I remember working, flat out, over multiple weekends in a row to produce all of those, right? From scratch, right? And hard binding some of those things up into hardbound documents, and putting them in front of customers and saying, look, I think this is evidence that, we've got you covered if you come with us. And then it's about kind of having the customer, kind of make a bet on you. And we were lucky enough we did that, and here we are today, right? Many of the resources that were built back then by a small group of individuals who found a way and who were empowered, which is kind of what sits behind Scrappy really, are still, at the core of what we use today, right? Branding's different and some of the words are different, but the underlying kind of root of all of those, or many of those at least, sit back a few years back with a group of individuals in the company that kind of just band together, even if they weren't incentivized to do so, or even if they didn't necessarily have any net gain themselves, right? Not necessarily sales folks or anything like it, but went all in on making sure the company was successful, and we were winning over here in EMEA, and that I think ended up kind of driving a lot of best practice globally, which is something that a lot of people that are kind of still here today are very proud of.
So like the Qualtrics culture, which is like one team and then the scrappiness and all the other things, and then your experiences from customer success, has this also like gone through like reflected on your personal relationships as well? It's a broad question, but what I mean is like because you have to maintain a good relationship with customers, has this also reflected on having good relationships with personal relationships? This includes your wife, your daughters.
Well, I don't know whether I have good relationships with my wife and my daughters because of I'm customer obsessed or whatever, but or all in. I not that I'm not all in, but look, I think there's you can't fake being customer obsessed for long, right? You can't really fake being one team. So I think what we're really good at is filtering out the folks who probably wouldn't be aligned to our culture in the first place, right? It's much more difficult. It's very difficult to find, just get a group of people and get them to influence them to act in a certain way, right? A random group of people. It's much easier to take 3 or 4 people who exhibit the cultural norms that you aspire to create in a broader group, then filter individuals on the way in the door to make sure they're going to align to those kind of that culture and those norms, and then add them to that group. And the culture will evolve and change over time. We didn't have tacos when I started working at Qualtrics, but tacos was more about, they're just the words to describe the culture that already existed. It's not like somebody came up with those words and we all decided to act in that way, right? That's the wrong way to do it. Although you do see some companies trying to do that, right? And so by nature, the people that join tend to be broadly aligned with those kind of tacos: transparent, all in, customer obsessed, one team, scrappy, in different ways. And I guess I'm one of those people, right? So that's probably part of my DNA. I don't think the Qualtrics culture has changed me, and now all of a sudden I have a better relationship at home. I think it's because I'm strong at what I'm strong at. I ended up working here and really enjoyed it, right? And I think when you talk to many of the people that work at Qualtrics, I think why they really like working here is it allows them to be themselves, and that happens to be aligned with the company culture and the values, right?
So, Donnchadh, 2 years ago, I was at Onuxmais University, which is located in Turkey, and I was the vice president of a student entrepreneurship club. So, although it's totally different from the position you are in, we also did like small things, like we would have our own team, we would manage the team, we would find people who would sponsor us, we would try to find new talented people. But we've made a lot of mistakes during the way, which kind of separated the one team part. Yeah. So people were starting to do their own things. People were starting to disengage. And it was our loss, because we weren't able to find the people that were like going to be fit in our club culture in the first place. So the club basically broke down. But what I've noticed here in especially like the Dublin office, like the people here, they're not only talented and smart and energetic and hardworking, but then you can really feel the tacos culture in them. Like they're friendly, they are one team, they will try to help you out. So my question is, how do you filter in the first place? Like how do you filter the people that are from the people that are not? Since a lot of people are able to poker face, let's say, during interviews.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, you can definitely pretend to be somebody else in an interview and give a textbook answer. We try and do our best during the interview process to kind of poke and prod, and generally the philosophy in the company, a hiring philosophy, and this goes back again to founders, is it is better to leave a good candidate go if we felt there was a question mark or a bit of a risk than risk bringing them in, right, and have them in some way deplete the culture and what we're about, right? So we actually, for every individual you see sitting out in a seat outside, there's obviously maybe 50 others that might have interviewed for that role, but there's definitely a few that were in strong consideration, but we had some question marks and we didn't let them through the door, right? So we hold a high bar in terms of we do let through the door. And then the other thing is even if folks aren't fully aligned to the tackles and they do get a role here, I think the culture is quite strong, and it's just human nature to just kind of when the day one when you get in the door, look around you about how people are acting or engaging with each other or engaging with customers, and kind of snap to that culture. It's the easiest way to. It's just the most human thing to do in that sort of environment. And so I think combination of that filtering, I think it's stronger than you think, right? And the strength of our culture and the fact that human nature is just
contagious.
We adapt as humans, right, to the environment that we're in to survive. And I think luckily we've got a really strong company culture and a really positive environment, and so people come in and are, one, excited that they're in this world now, and two, are very happy to kind of snap to the kind of the ways of working. I would say that was one of the things that kind of gave me a little bit of heartburn, and I was worried about when we were primarily working from home during the pandemic and hiring like crazy and more than doubling the size of the company, is that when we come back, we'll have lost that culture. People will have forgotten what it was like, and the people who are new were far more, were actually the majority, and therefore the culture would evolve to the negative because we're a little bit out of kind of control about how we influence people and how they act, and they would bring with them cultures of maybe previous workplaces and whatnot. It would dilute our own, right?
I've noticed that when I came here, the first thing that was on Dan Desmond's mind was, let's not forget about the culture, let's get it back and stuff like that.
I think that's important to all our leaders. Dan's a great guy. He understands Qualtrics culture, and I think he also understands what it's like to build an environment that kind of aligns to that culture. I think what we were quite deliberate in Dublin about, and previously, over the last couple of months, just actually lining up to when you joined, is making sure that we have all the leaders, and when I say leaders, I don't just mean managers or people in positions of authority, but also cultural leaders, people who we know are very aligned to the way we do things around here. All of those folks are present, are modeling the way to everybody else, and are sending a signal to everybody else about, this is how we act, this is how we treat each other, this is how we treat our customers, this is how we do business. And making an extra special effort to help everybody understand this is what good looks like, so that even though the new people are in the majority now, they get a clear signal from everybody else, right? And I think we've done a pretty good job in Dublin, and I think when we moved to our new office, an amazing facility in the city centre,
I've seen the pictures.
Massive amount of, you should go for a tour. It's the nicest office I've ever been in. I've been in a lot of offices, right? When it opens up, it's going to be amazing. But again, the office environment is one that, helps shape that culture a little bit as well and influences it. And I think we need to be very deliberate in how we think about how we use that space to make sure that we get what we need from that environment. To make sure it's a great place for people to work. It continues to be a great place to people to work. It's a great place to bring customers. It's a great place to help us all learn and grow as professionals. And also a good place for us to have fun. Which is, I think, we spend a lot of time at work these days. It'd be a terrible shame if we didn't have some fun along the way. right? And so that's one thing. Now again, we're gonna have to be deliberate again. So for step one, get back to the office. Step two, move to a new office, a new environment, and make sure that we're using that to full effect in terms of kind of helping us shape and carry the culture.
As someone who's just started his career, I think it's quite difficult to maintain the balance of work and having fun. I don't know, laughing, but also keep the professionality within the office.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you seem like pretty balanced out on that point. Do you agree or?
Well, look, you know, I would love to say that I'm 100% balanced all of the time. You know, I mean, there are times for serious conversations and there's times for jokes, and there's sometimes you do get them confused, but I think that experience comes with time. I would say that, like, just to realize everybody's human, right? I don't think I've ever heard somebody say they don't like having fun, right? And so every opportunity where it's appropriate, I try and do that when I'm working. Yeah, I mean, over the course of your early career in particular, it's sometimes you're kind of testing the boundaries, professional boundaries, about when things are appropriate and inappropriate. I think you can have fun and be very professional at the same time, though. Right? I don't think there's like a fun or professional. It's not like a binary thing, one or the other. You can be very professional, but also, you know, try and enjoy yourself in what you do. It just, you know, it's fun comes in many different forms, right? It's not like we're, you know, having meetings with customers cracking jokes every second sentence, right? But I think just creating an environment where it's enjoyable to work is also fun. Might not be joke filled, but you know, it's a skill when it comes to dealing with your colleagues and your customers and everybody else you work in, all the other stakeholders.
You know, when celebrities have this urge for wanting to be not seen, at least for a day or two, do you feel the same way sometimes? Because, I don't know, maybe people behave differently around you in the office, or maybe they feel intimidated by your titles, so they want to just be careful about what they say. Yeah, you know what I mean?
You always get that. I mean, it doesn't need to be like that's just a, you know, irrespective of seniority or whatever. I think people will naturally be just a little bit standoffish and suspicious of kind of people they don't know, right? I think you know, people make assumptions around who you are based off, you know, snippets of what they've seen of you, whether it's in a one-on-one conversation previously, or whether it's, you know, watching that individual kind of hosting an all hands or whatever, right? And so those snippets are kind of assembled in someone's mind together into kind of what they think of that person. And some people are more or less approachable based on the picture that's in other people's heads. I try and create a positive picture that's very approachable. I also make sure that I take the time to speak to everybody around the floor, so that it just creates so there is no tension or nervousness or anything like that, because there's no need to be. Is this a warning or something? There's no need to be. I mean, we're all, as I said, we're all human. We all got a job to do, and I don't think anybody should feel any different just because I'm around the floor. But I do, on the subject of being invisible, sometimes when it was a, you know, 5 day a week in the office job and you really needed to get kind of a piece of work done, sometimes I wished I was invisible then, right? So I'd often go off and hide in a corner somewhere and try and just crank out a piece of work if I had something to do. And that was the time when I did wish I was invisible. But no, I don't wish. When I come into the office, I want to make sure that I'm completely visible and that I'm getting around and spending time with the people I want to spend time with, which is all my colleagues in here, right? And they get to spend time with me as well. And I think the important thing about being in the office these days in a hybrid environment is that we don't come in and just Zoom surf for a day and then head home, right? You've had absolutely no impact there. The impact of you being in the office then is much, much lower than spending time, having lunch with folks, having coffee with folks, having one-to-one meetings with folks where you actually engage with them on other topics, personal or professional, at the start and the end of the meeting, or throughout. And I think it's Zoom is a fantastic technology, but it does create a sort of a filter and a barrier to having some of the other conversations and to creating personal connections. And I think it's important now that we use the office time that we do get with folks to overinvest in building those personal connections and having those conversations with folks that actually really matter, because they allow us all to do our job that bit better. And like I said, right back to having fun. It's good. It's much better fun if you kind of know somebody you're working with and you win or lose with them together, right, than just some other individual that you don't really have that personal connection with, right? I think it's much more enjoyable when you win with a group of people that you actually enjoy working with, you know.
Yeah. So we've almost 48 minutes since we've been talking.
Yeah.
So 12 minutes.
You'll cut this down into a 2-minute snippet
yeah.
for people to use, I assume. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, what do you think would a good question to ask you?
A good question to ask me?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because my mind only goes so far.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is the one where you kind of turn the tables.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self? Is it kind of a standard one, maybe?
Yeah, I'm gonna... Okay, I'll ask you 2 questions. What is the advice you would give to your 20-year-old self? And then what advice would you give to, I don't know, people who want to build a career, students who want to find a job, people that want to develop themselves? Yeah, something in that regard.
They're kind of the same. The answers to both those are the same. Well, first of all, I'd tell my 20-year-old self to prepare for podcasts more. I would know what I would say is, people are very focused on attaining roles or earning, a certain number of euro or pounds or dollars or whatever.
Turkish liras.
Yeah, Turkish liras, whatever it is, right, wherever you're from. And I think focusing, like being a generalist, there's a lot of power into being a generalist. So people want to get very focused and kind of dive into careers in their early 20s sometimes these days. And I think there's a huge amount of merit to use your 20s just to explore who you are, both personally and professionally, right? And try as many new things as possible professionally, right? I think that's probably, on reflection, something I was a little bit hesitant to do, is to kind of, because I had almost boxed myself off as an engineer, right? You're an engineer, that's what you're qualified to do, that's what you did in college, that's what you've been doing since you graduated, and not try anything else, right? And what you need to focus on is really trying to learn, because you don't know until you try some things. What do you really enjoy in work? What types of things? What kind of environment do you like? Do you like working with people? Do you like working in teams? Do you like being an individual contributor? Do you like working in isolation in a lab? Do you like working in an office? Do you like working outdoors? All of those things. I mean, sometimes you'll just know yourself, okay, yeah, no, I don't like being outdoors because whatever. I don't like getting wet or whatever it is. But some of those things you don't know, right? And so wherever you don't know, go and kind of think about the things that you like to do, right? You like engaging with people. Do you like solving problems? Do you like getting into the detail and working out, everything to the 5th decimal place? Do you like staying high level? Do you like speaking in public? Do you like making deals and negotiating? What are the things that you like? And over the first 10 or 15 years of your career, just focus on kind of figuring all of that stuff out and trying to and learn a ton and progress, of course, as well. But don't just focus on progression for progression's sake, or earning more for earning more sake to get to a number. Because some of the people that I know that did that kind of found themselves in a bit of a bottleneck or a cul-de-sac or a dead end in some cases, right? And some of the more successful people that I know focused on kind of building that broad skill set, probably not as deliberately as they might let you know. Maybe they kind of just ended up doing a bunch of different kind of roles that taught them a ton, but focusing on kind of figuring out who you are and what you enjoy, and then pursuing roles that allow you to kind of spend as much time doing the things you like and enjoy as possible, and that will also give you fulfillment, right? Ultimately, is really, really important, right? So you'll be working a long time. And of course, there's all the hygiene stuff about getting paid more and, you know, progressing quickly and whatever else. But like, getting paid more lasts a week and then you forget about it, and, you know, you've already probably spent all of the money on something, you know.
It's funny how many people think about money in the first place, and for you it's just a term of hygiene, like
that's absolutely hygiene thing, you know, absolutely hygiene thing. You'll spend the money no matter how much you earn. You'll probably spend the money, right? It's just human nature, I think. And by the way, that like endorphin hit of getting, hey, you got promoted and here's your new paycheck, that goes away after a week or two, and you're back to square one, right? Still with a job that maybe you don't like, or, you know, doesn't fulfill you or whatever else, right? And the things that you bring with you day to day are the fundamentals of the job, right? Do you like going into work every day? If you hate going into work every day but you get paid a lot, I mean, right, okay. You know, you're probably working a lot as well if you get paid a lot. So, you know, you spend most of your time doing something you hate.
And not having fun in the meanwhile.
Not having a fun, but, you know, you can look at your bank account and celebrate every time. So I don't know.
Donnchadh, I want to thank you for your time once again, like both for your time and for your time during the lunch break. And then thanks for the nice conversation. And
no problem. Listen, I hope we've given you enough content, and delighted to be here, and looking forward to listening to this podcast and all your other ones.
Yeah, sure. I have going Dan also. I'm going to have Dan also on the podcast.
Brilliant,
so, yeah.
Brilliant. I can't wait to hear Dan's. All right, no pressure on you, Dan.
Yeah, he loves talking, so it's gonna be a good one as well.
Well, yeah, you don't even need to be in the room for that one.
Yeah, that's true.
Cool.
Well, thanks,
right,
and yeah.
Great to spend some time with you.
See you. Bye.